So this is now passing. We're good to go on that. We want to make it fail though, kind of. Or we want to check, because this doesn't really check to see if that username exists so much as it's just kind of checking right now. We know that what it's checking is doing what it's supposed to do, but I'd much rather have something that also checks to see that it can return a true value. So in our user DB, we're going to edit this. One, we want to make sure that if we don't pass in username, that this does not succeed. So for example, if I do this, so if I just pass in an empty string and I run this test, it passes. And you might be thinking to yourself, wait, what? How can it pass? You didn't pass anything in. We don't understand. Well, actually, I did pass something in. I passed in an empty string. If I had passed in nothing and ran it, then we get a failure. So why? Well, let's see here. Our error is, this is hard to read. We get a long call stack, and I don't like this. This is actually the database complaining that we did something wrong, and we really don't want that to happen. So the reason that it'll take in an empty string, and I want to show this to you real quickly. The reason that it will take an empty string is because if so let's put a breakpoint right here. If I run this in debug mode, it's going to pause at that breakpoint that I set. So now if we look at what user is returning null. So it's not false, right? So okay, so user is returning null, but it's returning nonetheless. It's saying I couldn't find a username that's an empty string. And that doesn't break our code. So I'll just let that play out. And so what we need to do here is make sure that username is real, that it exists. And we also need to make sure that it's been set. So here we're going to write a test outside of here. So we're going to say it should throw an error because no username was passed. We'll write another asynchronous function, and then we're going to say const check await username exists, and we're not going to pass anything. And then we're going to say, or not say, we're going to wrap this in a try. So then exit that out, and we're going to say try. And then we're going to say catch. And in here, we're going to say expect e.to be an error. Okay. Don't forget to put equals. So now let's see if this runs. and everything passed. This did in fact throw an error, and we expected it to be an error. Now let's write one more thing, because I want to make this a little bit more understandable for whoever possibly sees that error. We want to say expect e.message to be, and then let's say please provide, or no username was passed as an argument. Save that again, we run the test, and we should see it fail. So always, always, always run your tests right after you run them or write them to make sure that they actually can fail. All right, so let's see here. It says it's not a function. How do you test strings? To equal. There we go, not to be. So to equal. My bad. Okay. Now we'll run it again. And again, it should fail. All right. So assertion error, expected where parameter username has undefined value does not equal no username was passed as an argument. So let's copy this string, no username was passed as an argument, and we will say copy. And then inside userdb.js, we are going to write a little error checking here. So if no username, okay, then we are going to, or actually, hold on. We don't want to say no username because that would be the same thing as a string. So if username dot, not strip. So if username equals null or username equals undefined, throw new error and paste in that string. Okay, we will go ahead and save that. And now if we rerun this test, everything passes and we are good to go. So now we have two tests that are passing. And we can confidently say that this will check to see if a username exists. Now let's make one, we can confidently say it, but I want to absolutely be able to say it. So now we're going to write something that actually inserts a username into the database real quickly, removes it, or checks to see if it exists, and then removes it. Okay, so in user DB test, we're now going to have to include in user DB.test, we're now going to have to include our DB. So we are going to say const DB equals require up models. All right, so we're going to write a test here, and we're going to say it should it should create a username, it should create a user, see if username already exists, and fail. All right, so real quick, we're going to do something here, and this is how you would create an entry in your database. So we'll say await db.user.create. Okay, and now we have to follow along with the model. So remember, the model has a first name, and we'll say test, a last name, and we'll also say test, a username, we're going to say test here as well, a password, test, and finally an email. And this, we have to remember, this has to be an email. We have validation in there for that. So this, we're going to say test@test.com, and then we actually have to increase these because these are not acceptable. So we'll say test_test because these are too small or too short. All right, so this will create this instance, and we're going to attach this to here. So we're going to say const test equals await db.user.create. Okay, this creates our actual user. Now, before we write to see if this already exists, we need to make sure that this gets destroyed at the end. Otherwise, our next iteration of this test will fail. So then we want to say await test.destroy. Okay. And what this will do is it will take this object that gets returned from here, and now it's going to delete it. And let's look at the create in the documents. So we will see, I think it's under model usage. All right, so we have model usage. So we have find one. So we have find or create. This can be used to see if one already exists. If not, create them, but I really just want create. All right, here it is. So the code created a new instance. So this is going to create an instance for us right here, user.create. And then we follow the model. We see that it returns a promise. Okay, and then we can do whatever we want with that promise. But sometimes we need to destroy things. Let's see here. I think it's under instances. Incrementing, destroying, or deleting. Okay. So once we create something, we can see here that we can then destroy that. But here we go. If the paranoid option is true, the object will not be deleted. Instead, the deleted at column will be set to the current timestamp. To force the deletion, you can pass force true to destroy, or to the destroy call. So this is what we want to do here, because remember, this is a test. So we don't want this guy hanging around and just continuing to exist in our database. So we are going to say test destroy force true, and this will remove the entry from the database completely. It's inside of here that we actually want to test to see if this user already exists. Okay. So we're going to call await, const check equals await user name exists, and we're going to pass in the username test_test because that's what we used right up here. Okay. Then we're going to say expect check to be true. Because this user now already does exist, we expect check to be true. This is the final test to make sure this function is actually doing what it's supposed to do. So we'll run this test, and we will see if it passes. All right, it did pass. Looks like we have a not null violation. Remember that we added permission ID. Okay, so let's see here where we have that. So remember that we had added permission ID, and it's saying that this permission ID is not allowed to be null. A user has to have one. So if we look at our permissions table, we see, let's actually have it load. If we look at our permissions table, we see that there are two different permissions you can have. We're going to give this test a permission of 1. So back in our editor, we will open up const test, and we will say, comma, permission ID is 1. And then we will rerun this test. All right, we got another one. So we have column ID cannot be null. This is unusual. So you might be wondering, well, what the heck is going on here? What do you mean column ID cannot be null? So remember back when I had said, if we look at our permissions ID, when we created our permissions ID, I said, make sure that auto increment is set to true. That way you don't have to manually manage creating IDs. Well, unfortunately, I forgot to tell you that we also don't want to manually manage creating these UUIDs for our user. So what we're going to do is say right here, default value equals data types dot UUID. Okay? Whoop. There we go. So what this means is that it's going to automatically place a UUID in here, and we won't have to manually manage that. Now, because this is a model sequelize type thing, we don't need to worry about dropping the table from the database or recreating or anything. We're good to go there. So now, if we go back into this and we run this test, we should see it pass. Nope, okay, we still have something going on. Okay. Sorry, I'm back. So apparently you do need to actually type in UUID v4. Now if we look at our database and we run this test, we will see oh, it deletes it right away. Okay, so now if we look at our database, we see that it did place in this UUID version 4 here, and then it deleted them. So that's good. Real quick, if you have this in your database, delete it now. So we'll go ahead and delete this row. All right. But either way, if we run this test now in UserDB, it will actually pass because it is returning an object. Okay, so instead of, let's actually go back here and let's modify this comment and say if return user if username already exists. All right, we have one leg down. You can definitely see how this can become daunting to do. I do know that. Like, we created one tiny little function here, and this took us roughly an hour to do this. Yeah, it took us roughly an hour to do this. But I do highly encourage you to still use tests, because now I have an entire test suite, 3 tests running at any time that I can say, does this function, this UserDB function, actually do what it's supposed to do? You hear them calling, shouting your name, turn up the collar and walk away. Feels like you're falling, now who is to blame? Wishing you